relate.
This is Decades for June 1st. Today, Decades devotes a full day to actress, sex symbol, and pop culture icon Marilyn Monroe. The silver screen star was born on this day in 1926. First, the author of the controversial book Marilyn, a biography. Norman Mailer chats with Dick Cavett. Then we present an assortment of documentaries and retrospectives that profile her life, including her rise to stardom, political affairs, and celebrity relationships. We begin with a special Through the Decades, focusing on the legend. This is Through the Decades, a unique hour-long time capsule. Today we look back at Marilyn Monroe, the glamour, the fascination, and the challenges of her marriage to Joe DiMaggio.
Now, a romance that has thrilled millions. The marriage of beautiful Marilyn Monroe and Joe DiMaggio.
The performance that changed a We'll Always Think of Happy Birthday.
That every Kennedy was there except for the First Lady, which was extremely unusual.
And when the director called action on the scene that will forever be tied to her memory.
That scene in cinematic history is considered the defining moment of all film.
Those stories and more in the next hour, part of a different kind of television experience where we relive, remember, and relate to the events that are cemented in history.
I'm Ellie Pye Hong.
And I'm Carrie Sayers.
And I'm your host, Bill Curtis. This is Through the Decades. For as long as actors have been getting up to perform in front of strangers, there have been stars. But there was, and remains, something special about the woman born Norma Jean Mortensen on June 1st, 1926. As we'll see for the next hour, when it comes to Marilyn Monroe, we never could get enough. We begin, where else, but with the romance that captured the attention of the world. It was January 14th, 1954, when Monroe married Joe DiMaggio. The couple was the essence of glamour. But it was a fairy tale that wasn't built to last. Joe DiMaggio, Joltin' Joe, the Yankee Clipper. He was baseball's hero. Star center fielder for the New York Yankees, 3 times the league's most valuable player, 9-time World Series champion, and owner of one of baseball's most storied records.
Now here's the hit that makes it 42 games in a row for Jolting Joe. And everybody's relieved. Everybody has a pat on the back for baseball's slugging star.
He would extend that hitting streak to 56 games, becoming one of the game's immortal greats. Joe retired in 1951 after 13 seasons, all with the New York Yankees. And while his career was ending, all the way across the country, a new star of the screen was just starting to emerge.
How long do you have to work around here before you stop calling me Mr. Haskins?
I always treat men with respect. Then they treat me with respect, Mr. Haskins.
Her name was Marilyn Monroe. In the early 1950s, she was in the midst of her breakthrough, on her way to becoming one of the decade's most popular sex symbols. And someone who was taking particular notice was Joe DiMaggio. DiMaggio and Monroe met in 1952. Their infatuation with each other was almost immediate. They became inseparable. And thanks to the press, their relationship was soon a worldwide sensation. Joe and Marilyn were the undisputed power couple of their day, combining the best of the sports world with all the glamour of Hollywood. They were a constant subject of the media, something that only intensified when the two decided to get married on January 14th, 1954.
Now, a romance that has thrilled millions. The marriage of beautiful Marilyn Monroe and Joe DiMaggio. And there's no surprise in the fact that it attracted a record crowd to the San Francisco court where the ceremony was performed.
It was supposed to be a quiet affair, but somehow word got out that Marilyn and Joe were getting married at a San Francisco courthouse. The press and fans arrived in droves, pushing and shoving their way to catch a glimpse of the all-American newlyweds before they set off on their honeymoon, where they'd be met with similar mobs.
When a well-known honeymoon couple arrives at Tokyo Airport, a throng of 4,000 baseball and movie fans surge out of control, break through police lines. Joe DiMaggio and his bride smile bravely at their greeters, but they don't dare move. So back into the plane they go, while police clear a path to the cargo hatch with DiMaggio's convertible.
But bliss was short-lived. The honeymoon was interrupted when Marilyn left to entertain troops stationed in Korea, leaving Joe alone in Japan. And things didn't get much better when they returned to the U.S. Later, Marilyn filed for divorce. The marriage of the decade was all over in just 274 days. 2 years later, Marilyn married playwright Arthur Miller, another marriage that would end in divorce. As for Joe, he never remarried, but he and Marilyn would reconnect, establishing a close friendship around the time of her untimely death in 1962. Their relationship was passionate and tumultuous, a love affair of the highest profile, epitomizing celebrity and the fascination it has always drawn.
As our look back at the life of Marilyn Monroe continues, we remember the public fascination with her love life, from her marriage to Arthur Miller to her relationship with President Kennedy.
Every Kennedy was there except for the First Lady, which was extremely unusual.
Plus, we'll turn to her work on the screen, from the power of a skirt and a subway grate to the movie that all but killed the motion picture code.
Some Like It Hot is Marilyn Monroe's most iconic performance.
And from the glossy pages of the first centerfold to what she wore to bed, we're looking at how Marilyn's magic helped establish some iconic brands. It's all today on Through the Decades.
Now we turn the lens of time back to 1956 for a glimpse of the media frenzy when Marilyn Monroe married Arthur Miller.
Actress Marilyn Monroe and playwright Arthur Miller are married, climaxing days of worldwide speculation. The happy couple poses for a battery of feverish photographers at their honeymoon retreat, the Miller Farm in Roxbury, Connecticut. Married suddenly and secretly, it's the second time for the 40-year-old playwright and the third for the glamorous 30-year-old actress. Next comes a film in England for Mrs. Marilyn Miller.
We turn now to one of the defining moments of the 1960s. Marilyn Monroe in a sheer dress, singing Happy Birthday to President John F. Kennedy. But the glamour and sophistication of the event concealed the passions and the politics behind it, which ultimately consumed one of its principal players. It was an all-star 45th birthday celebration for President John F. Kennedy, held at New York's Madison Square Garden. And Marilyn Monroe is slated to sing to him, if she ever showed up.
Mr. President, Marilyn Monroe.
On that bill entertaining that night, the president, in addition to Marilyn, were Ella Fitzgerald, Shirley MacLaine, Jack Benny. The list went on forever. Maria Callas. And what they did throughout the evening is they'd have 3 or 4 entertainers, and then Lawford would come out and introduce Marilyn, and she wouldn't appear. And they'd have 3 or 4 more, and he'd make another introduction. And there exists on film about 4 of those introductions, culminating with the late Marilyn Monroe. But it's perfectly obvious that that was a joke and that she was intended to appear with his birthday cake as the grand finale to sing happy birthday to him.
The overtly seductive performance of the Children's Party standard, broadcast on national TV, caused a sensation and teased at a secret America didn't yet know, that JFK and Marilyn had been having an affair. Though the secret could have been inferred by the event's one notable absence.
Jackie wasn't there. A lot of people don't know that every Kennedy was there except for the First Lady, which was extremely unusual. When Jackie found out the details of what Marilyn was going to do and how it was going to be conducted, she told her Secret Service agent that this administration is completely out of control with this Marilyn Monroe business, and I'm not going to sit and watch that. So Jackie went to Virginia, to their home in Virginia, and she stayed there. The next day, she saw a report on television of this concert, and there's Marilyn in the see-through dress singing Happy Birthday to her husband in a way that was probably more suitable for a burlesque show. And Jackie was very upset. Later that day, the telephone rang, and it was Ethel Kennedy, who had been present that night at Madison Square Garden. And according to my source, the two of them engaged in a conversation about what had occurred. And Jackie said that she blamed Bobby for orchestrating the whole event, for insisting that Marilyn be there, and Bobby did insist. Then after Jackie and Ethel ended their conversation, Jackie called Bobby and had some heated words with him that were very uncharacteristic of the relationship that they enjoyed, which was always very warm. And Jackie said that she felt that Bobby was playing some kind of a sick little game with a movie star. So Jackie always had a sense of compassion for Marilyn Monroe, and she really didn't like the way that JFK was handling that relationship. And after the Madison Square Garden concert, Jackie gave the president an ultimatum. You break it off with Marilyn right now, or in 1964, when you're campaigning for president again, you'll be doing so without a wife at your side.
JFK sent brother Bobby, who was also his attorney general, to Los Angeles to end the affair with Marilyn. But the visit only resulted in an affair between Marilyn and Bobby, an affair that seems to have been underway the night of the birthday performance.
I interviewed a man named Mickey Song, who was one of Marilyn's hairdressers. And he was at Madison Square Garden the night that Marilyn sang Happy Birthday to JFK, and he was taking care of Marilyn in the dressing room, and Bobby was waiting outside. Bobby asked him to leave, closed the door, spent about 15 minutes in there, and then left. And then when Mickey Song went back in, Marilyn was disheveled and kind of giggled and said, "Can you help me put myself back together again?" So we know that at least as of May 19th, 1962, they were having some kind of an affair.
But Bobby Kennedy, like his brother, was both Catholic and married. So the end of the relationship was a foregone conclusion to everyone but Marilyn Monroe.
It got very complicated because Marilyn was, as I said, very emotionally needy and emotionally unstable. And initially, her relationships with the Kennedy brothers, who were the president and the attorney general of the United States, were this tremendous high. She felt very good about herself, that these very powerful intellectual men were interested in her. But then when they started to treat her badly, they didn't return her phone calls, they just tried to hope she'd go away, she felt used and abused, and rightfully so. She said at one point, "I was good enough for them when they wanted me." And you know, the thing about Marilyn Monroe, it's kind of sad because she was always used for her beauty and her sexuality and then rejected. I mean, from the time she was a littlest girl. And her biggest problem was rejection. She'd been rejected by her father and by her mother and by her foster parents. And so for her to be the biggest movie star in the world and still being rejected just really drove her, I think, to the state that she reached that resulted in her death.
Now we head back to 1956, when just Marilyn Monroe's arrival at Heathrow Airport was enough to make news.
She's here, said the headlines, and everyone knew they meant the American film star with the famous shape and the wiggly walk. London Airport was all keyed up for Marilyn's arrival. She was met by Sir Laurence Olivier and his wife Vivian Leigh. Miss Monroe is Mrs. Miller now. That's her playwright husband. Next, a press interview, but this had its difficulties. It went something like this.
Now, wait a minute. Miss Monroe, please. Miss Monroe. What do you think of Miss Dawes, you see?
Later, at a London hotel, Marilyn agreed to face the cameras again. Once more, it became abundantly clear that her worldwide fame and popularity made her visit to Britain front-page news. We hope she'll like filming over here and thoroughly enjoy her stay.
It was one of those moments when worlds came together. As our look at the life of Marilyn Monroe continues, we dig into the CBS vault for a unique moment in time when Marilyn spoke with legendary newsman Edward R. Murrow on live television.
Your picture has been on the cover of almost all popular magazines, hasn't it?
No, not the Ladies' Home Journal.
That you would like, would you?
Yes.
It was April 8th, 1955, when, as part of his CBS News program, Person to Person, Edward R. Murrow spoke live with Marilyn Monroe, who at the time was staying with photographer Milton Green and his wife, Amy, at their home in Connecticut.
Your picture has been on the cover of almost all popular magazines, hasn't it?
No, not the Ladies' Home Journal.
That you would like, would you?
Yes.
Why?
Well, I used to long for it. I used to appear on, when I was modeling, on men's magazine covers, such as, I don't know, Squint, Peep, Take a Peep, all those things.
But not the Ladies' Home Journal?
No.
Amy, tell me, does Marilyn know her way around the kitchen? Is she very much help around the house?
Well, yes, she is. She's sort of an ideal guest. She's not trouble to anyone, and she picks up after herself, and she's just fine. You don't even know she's around.
Does she make her own bed?
Yes, she does, and she helps me with the baby to bathe him.
And cleans her own room?
Yes, she does.
Uh-huh. Has she ever come in handy as a babysitter?
No, that's it.
On quite a number of occasions.
Yes, Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve.
Well, would it be fair to say that you got rather tired of playing the same kind of roles all the time and wanted to try something different?
Well, it's not that I object to doing musicals or comedies. In fact, I rather enjoy it. But I would like to do also dramatic parts, too.
Marilyn, what's the best part you ever had in a movie?
Well, one of the best parts I've ever had was in the Asphalt Jungle, John Huston's picture, and then 7 Year Itch with, well, Billy Wilder's picture.
You think that's going to be a big one, too, don't you?
Pardon?
You think that's going to be a big one, too, don't you, the 7 Year Itch?
Yes, I think it'll be a very good picture, and I would like to continue making this type of picture.
Well, now, what's the smallest part you ever had?
One in a picture called Ticket to Tomahawk. I had one word. Well, not exactly a word. I said,
Who's helped you most in your movie career, Marilyn?
Well, a number of people have contributed greatly. I think when John Huston wanted me for the part in Asphalt Jungle, and I think when Billy Wilder wanted me for the part in 7 Year Itch, I think that was very important. Also, working with my coach, Natasha Lytess, she's helped me very much from the very beginning. And I also got a great deal from attending classes with Michael Chekhov.
Now that you're a New Yorker, how do you like this city, anyway?
Oh, I love it. Everyone's very friendly, and it's a very optimistic, friendly city.
How do you like Connecticut?
I like it. It's the first time I'd ever seen the woods. And I love to walk in the woods with the dogs, and I enjoyed it.
Where are the doors for?
Well, are you always recognized wherever you go in the nearby towns and in New York?
No, not really. I can put on a no polo coat and no makeup and get along pretty well.
As our look at Marilyn Monroe continues, we move from her personal life to her professional career. We'll look back on that unforgettable scene with the white dress and her turn in Some Like It Hot.
The unique thing about the film was the way Billy had us approach it. You know, there wasn't any salaciousness involved in it. There wasn't anything lewd or, you know, it was just a movie of two guys dressed as women. And that's, I think, was the strength of the film. And the extraordinary dialogue and the jokes that made it such a classic film, you know.
It's right up there as one of the most iconic scenes in cinematic history. Marilyn Monroe standing over a New York subway grate, her dress flying up from the breeze down below. That moment from The 7-Year Itch, captured on film forever, such promise for a future that was not meant to be. It was the gust of wind felt round the world. That iconic moment when Marilyn Monroe, in a stunning white halter dress, catches a cool breeze on a steamy night in New York City.
Hey, wait a minute!
That oh-so-memorable scene from Billy Wilder's comedy The 7-Year Itch would end up being the movie's moment to remember. But shooting that scene would have repercussions far beyond box office returns.
Everything's fine. A married man, air conditioning, champagne and potato chips. It's just a wonderful party.
The blonde bombshell who played the ditzy girl.
This is what they call classical music, isn't it?
Yes.
I could tell because there's no vocal.
Don't talk. Let it sweep over you.
To promote the film, newspapers announced when and where the scene would be shot. And the actress, beloved by her fans, got New Yorkers to come out. So many people came to see the famous skirt-stealing scene that crowd noise became a factor even at the late hour. Director Billy Wilder had her do take after take to try to get it right, but ultimately it had to be reshot later on the Fox lot in California. But it was Marilyn's new husband, former New York Yankee great Joe DiMaggio, who was there on set and was most bothered by his wife's sexy subway scene. He was said to be enraged by the crowds and the retakes, and later, back at their hotel, he and Marilyn reportedly had a huge fight, during which DiMaggio assaulted his wife. The couple announced their separation less than a month later. Their marriage would end, though they would remain friends, and DiMaggio would even escort her to the movie's premiere. In 2011, the white dress Marilyn wore for her still talked about cooling off scene fetched more than $4.5 million at an auction.
That scene in cinematic history is considered the defining moment of all film.
As for the movie itself,
Hi. We forgot about the stairs. Isn't that silly? It was very easy. I just pulled out the nails.
Oh.
It's perfectly safe. Nobody will ever find out.
well, you can never go wrong with Marilyn. One of the greatest film comedies of all time was in 1959. Marilyn Monroe starred in Some Like It Hot with Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon. Directed and produced by Billy Wilder, the movie's overwhelming success put a final nail in the coffin for the strict motion picture production code that was in place at the time. When Some Like It Hot opened on March 29, 1959, the Billy Wilder comedy took the world by storm.
Some Like It Hot is arguably the funniest Hollywood comedy of all time. And it's a film that has an enduring appeal. Even today, when I show it to classes, students cannot believe how funny the film is and how subversive it is, because it is a gender-bending comedy, and it's a film that seems quite progressive.
His musicians witness the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, and they are seen by the massacreurs.
who are now going to kill them. The only way that they can stay alive is to disguise themselves. They're out-of-work musicians. They join an all-girl orchestra.
The unique thing about the film was the way Billy had us approach it. You know, there wasn't any salaciousness involved in it. There wasn't anything lewd or, you know, it was just a movie of two guys dressed as women. And that's, I think, was the strength of the film. And the extraordinary dialogue and the jokes that made it such a classic film, you know.
25 years after the movie was released, Lemmon, Curtis, and Wilder reunited on Coronado Island in San Diego, where they filmed it. The two actors recalled how they prepared for their roles.
He hired a guy who was the world's foremost, I've forgotten his name, remember, the world's foremost female impersonator who wouldn't fly, came all the way over on the ship, took him a week, and he came out to coach us before we started filming on how to look and how to move and how to work. At the end of 3 days, he quit in a complete rage, and he said, Curtis is wonderful, he's beautiful, he knows how to do it. He says, Lemmon is impossible. He will never pass. What he didn't realize is that that's exactly what Billy wanted and what it should be. If I was good at it, then it wouldn't have been funny.
As for the female lead,
Some Like It Hot is Marilyn Monroe's most iconic performance. At her absolute sexiest, some of the dresses that she wears in the film are incredibly low-cut and risque, but there's also a hint of sadness to her performance. I mean, her character is somebody who's been very unlucky in love and is essentially an alcoholic. And knowing what we know about Marilyn's eventual fate, it's hard not to see that character in somewhat autobiographical terms.
Lemmon also explained why he signed on in the first place.
When Billy came to me in a restaurant and suddenly unloaded very rapidly with that machine gun crazy accent of his, the story of Some Like It Hot, and there was no script, and said, do you want to do it? I said, yes. I will do it. And there was only one reason, because it is Billy Wilder and because of what Tony said. You're working with a man that is extraordinary and of high intelligence and high taste. And so I had no fear about, you know, and he says, so you and the other guy, you're going to be in drag for about 85% of the film. Do you want to do it? Well, you're not going to say, yeah, I'll do it right away, but you would with him.
We did not know what is going to happen to it. We did not know that it's going to amuse them and going to amuse them for such a long time that it's going to become, in quotes, a kind of a comedy classic. No, we just, you know, we all hope the best, but unfortunately it just comes out very rarely like one of the very best. And it's just wonderful if you happen to have to be represented among those pictures.
When our journey continues, we turn to Marilyn Monroe's impact beyond Hollywood. From the first cover of a magazine that would define sexy, to how her bedtime routine will forever be tied to one of the world's most successful perfumes. It's all still to come on Through the Decades.
She captivated the hearts of men and the envy of women. Today, Decades celebrates the birthday of silver screen star Marilyn Monroe. Join us for an all-day event with a special Marilyn edition of Through the Decades. We take a look at her career, persona, and legacy with a memorable episode of The Dick Cavett Show, along with a series of documentaries and retrospectives. Decades remembers Marilyn Monroe today.
In an end-of-an-era announcement, Playboy magazine recently revealed it will no longer feature pictures of naked women, a tradition that began in December 1953 by featuring Marilyn Monroe on the cover.
Not in my wildest dreams, as wild as my dreams were, did I have any notion of what was to lie ahead for me.
What lay ahead was Playboy, a $500 million empire that got its start in December 1953. When Hugh Hefner published a new men's magazine featuring a naked Marilyn Monroe. She would be Playboy magazine's first centerfold.
There was a moment in time when, in the summer of 1953, I had less than $200 in my bank. And that fall, pasted together and published the first issue of Playboy. And I had only enough money to publish the one issue, and that was done largely on credit. It's credit from a printer. But it was like a moment that was waiting to happen.
It was the 50s. The foundations of the sexual revolution were still being built. Part of the moment that would explode in the years to come can be traced to Playboy's early success.
I felt tremendously successful in the first year because the magazine was enough of a success so that I knew that there would be a second year. The fact that it would turn into an empire with bunnies and mansions and that I would literally begin to, in a very dramatic and very public way, live out the lifestyle of the magazine was not at all in the original concept. How could one have imagined that?
Playboy's mark would extend beyond the pages of the magazine, most noticeably to the bunnies and the various Playboy clubs. Candace Jordan was just out of high school in the early 70s when she got her job as a bunny at the Playboy Club in St. Louis. Soon after, Hef caught a glimpse of her in a Best Bunny pictorial and beckoned her to his Playboy mansion in Chicago.
When I came to Chicago, I would work the door at the Chicago Playboy Club, and I met all the art directors and all the people that were in the photo department upstairs. After so time had passed, somebody said, "You should shoot for centerfold." And I said, "Fine." So I tested for it, and I got it.
Candace said she had no qualms about taking it all off for the magazine.
No, none whatsoever, no. Listen, when you're in your 20s and your figure is flawless, you don't have any qualms about posing for Playboy.
But that wasn't the case for Pamela Anderson, admitting she was in tears when she stripped down for her Playmates shoot.
I was just appalled at what was going on, and I was so frightened, and tears were coming to my eyes. Luckily they got the cover of the first roll of film because I was just breaking down.
Pamela would overcome those fears and go on to become one of Hef's most famous Playboy Playmates. But this Playboy bunny and Playmate says her lack of nerves was due to the professionalism of the Playboy photographers.
People say, "Oh, weren't you nervous? Weren't this?" The photographers had seen so many naked bodies. They just want to make the photo beautiful. So, they're not looking at you like a sex object by a long shot. They're just trying to make a beautiful photo.
The truth is, photographers, it's not a romantic relationship. You have a relationship during that moment when you're shooting. There's no question about that. But when it's over, and you move on. I mean, and the photographer is much more involved in lighting and posing and propping and all the nuances that you go through in getting a proper picture, as opposed to the fact that you're dealing with a naked woman. Well, of course you're dealing with a naked woman, but there isn't the sexual tension that one might think there. There isn't. There just isn't.
Playboy reached its peak in the 70s. Some estimates say they were selling more than 5 million magazines in 1975.
It was the power of Playboy that we had back then.
And while the skin was undoubtedly the focus, just a few pages later, you were as likely to read interviews with Malcolm X, Dr. King, or Jimmy Carter. Big-name journalists wrote for the magazine, and some of the hottest celebrities of the day posed for the cover.
It was an exciting time. I mean, I really don't have, as much as I like what I'm doing now, and I really love what I do now, but I equally really enjoy and think back fondly and great memories of all the people that I knew, all the adventures that I had. And it was a fabulous time.
And at the center of it all, there was always one man, almost as recognizable as his infinitely licensable logo.
He's a living icon. I mean, he's a legend, obviously. I mean, the things that he's done to change the world are just mind-numbing. And when I met him, he's very down to earth. He's got an incredibly witty sense of humor. He's as sharp as a tack. He's supremely intelligent. One of the first for the equality movement, civil rights movement. I mean, one of the first advocates for it. So the things that he did, I mean, and he was just a gentleman. And I can understand a lot of people ask, what is he doing with all these young girls? They're attracted to him. He's not holding a gun at their heads. I mean, he's like the old-time manners, and he appreciates women. He loves women.
And speaking of Hef, he explained his feeling to Entertainment Tonight in 1992.
To dream the kind of dreams I dreamed and have them come true, to make the kind of difference that I've managed to make in terms of society, is very satisfying for me. So I think I have to look on my life and say it's been a life well spent.
Marilyn Monroe wasn't even born when Coco Chanel debuted her signature fragrance, Chanel No. 5. But it only took one statement for the two to be forever connected.
I prefer gestures, little things of life that speak without words. You don't have to ask for it. He knows what you want. Chanel.
Catherine Deneuve was one of the first famous faces to represent Chanel No. 5. The legendary perfume launched by leading French fashion designer Coco Chanel debuted on May 5, 1921. Chanel had dreamed up the idea of a modern mist for her high society clients a year before. She wanted to create what she called a woman's perfume with a woman's scent. Her then lover, Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich Romanov of Russia, introduced her to Ernest Beau, official perfumer to the Russian royal family. Chanel commissioned Beau to bring her vision to life, to defy the convention of simple single-flower fragrances. The result was revolutionary, an opulent bouquet of more than 80 scents, including rose and jasmine, enhanced by new synthetic chemicals, aldehydes, which magnified the aroma.
Le numéro 5 est en quelque sorte le premier parfum utilisant beaucoup de fleurs, de produits naturels, mais qui ne renvoie à aucune senteur précise.
The perfume was named No. 5 because Chanel had chosen the 5th sample that Beau had prepared for her. 5 also happened to be Mademoiselle Chanel's lucky number.
Alors ce nom numéro 5 qui effectivement était d'une modernité absolue pour l'époque, un nom identifiable et prononçable dans toutes les langues, était donc la 5e proposition que le nez avait formulée à Gabrielle Chanel.
In another radical departure, the perfume was presented in a simple, striking bottle, distinguishing it from the elaborate and fussy bottles of the 1920s. Chanel No. 5 was an instant success in Parisian social circles. Bolstered by bold new forms of advertising in the world of fragrance, its fame would soon spread, making it over the years the best-selling perfume in the world. Its place was etched in history when Marilyn Monroe told an interviewer in 1952 that all she wears to bed is a few drops of No. 5. 50 years after her death, the House of Chanel would use the phrase in a new ad. Sales continued to soar in the 1960s when artistic director Jacques Allou began to feature celebrities. But after Coco Chanel's death in 1971, the company's image began to diminish, and it looked at ways to reposition itself. In 1979, Chanel first aired their Share the Fantasy commercial, a spot that was conspicuously lacking in sexual explicitness and would become a defining moment for the French fragrance. Subsequent commercials were like mini-films featuring surreal fantasies and seduction, and the iconic sculpture of the bottle, which would be immortalized by Andy Warhol in his 1980 silkscreens. Today, a perfume created in 1921 remains a best-selling and most famous fragrance in the world, the scent of a woman for eternity.
As connected as Marilyn's story is to brands like Playboy and Chanel, her journey is also pivotal to another bombshell of the 1950s. When we continue, the story of Monroe and Jane Mansfield.
As bright as Marilyn Monroe's light shone, her death in August of 1962 hit just as hard.
One of the most famous stars in Hollywood history is dead at 36. Marilyn Monroe was found dead in bed under circumstances that were in tragic contrast to her glamorous career as a comic talent. On the surface, she seemed to have such a zest for life. Her international appeal took her from command appearances to the other side of the world and entertainment for Korean GIs. The star led a far from normal childhood and had 12 sets of foster parents, leading her to say in her last interview that she was never used to being happy, so it wasn't something she ever took for granted. She never let her personal feelings interfere with her job, and she was the idol of the GIs, the animation of foxhole dreams. She found no happiness in marriage. Her second husband was baseball immortal Joe DiMaggio, and that marriage ended as had her first in divorce. Her third husband was playwright Arthur Miller, and they too separated. Miss Monroe played in 23 films since her debut in 1950, films that grossed $200 million. The Golden Girl received 5,000 fan letters a week, and to those fans, she never let any personal problems dim her screen glamour. Despite flashes of temperament and tantrums, she turned in performances that kept her among the greatest box office favorites in motion picture history.
It's easy to view Marilyn Monroe's life in a bit of a vacuum, told succinctly through newsreel and film rolls. But in reality, her life and career had more than a few parallels with another bombshell, Jayne Mansfield.
If you're any good at geography, you'll recognize Jayne Mansfield. And you'll recognize her car as a 1906 Gregoire, if you don't care about geography. Jane, for excellent reasons, which you can probably see for yourself, has been stealing the picture at the Cannes Film Festival. The muscular gentleman with her, oh, well, that's her husband. Jane visited the late Aga Khan's widow at her villa. Wearing an outstandingly attractive swimsuit, she decided on a plunge into the pool. Well, plunging in this case is not quite her line, perhaps. Still, it's a new angle on Miss Mansfield, and the famous film star's quite as buoyant as you'd expect.
Jayne Mansfield always wanted to be a movie star. Even her first marriage in Dallas, while still a teenager, didn't slow her down.
You know, even when we would just be together in public, I don't care whether we were having a soda at the drugstore or what, she was the center of attention.
Ironically, for this future film star, when her big break came, it was on the stage.
Jane became famous doing a Broadway play called Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter. It was originally written for me by a young playwright named George Axelrod, and I turned the role down like a dummy, and Jane took it and became a star.
Mansfield's Broadway debut coincided with another famous blonde's arrival in New York. Marilyn Monroe had abandoned Hollywood to study at Lee Strasberg's Actors Studio.
When Marilyn left 20th Century Fox, they said, well, we'll show her, and they said there's this hot blonde in a play in New York, we'll bring her in. So they brought Jane in, and they were trying to create like a Super Monroe to lure Marilyn back. For a brief period while Marilyn was gone, she was it in this town. I mean, she showed up at all the premieres, and she was very glamorous, and her second husband, the muscle man, Mickey Hargitay, would carry her in and make quite a spectacle. I mean, she lived the life to the hilt.
Washington or bust, but it's both as the autograph hounds catch Jayne Mansfield arriving in the American capital. The foremost city in the States says welcome to one of the foremost stars of the screen. She drove through in a bus, single-decker, but still crowded upstairs. First stop, the Capitol building, and a meeting with the Speaker of the House, Sam Rayburn. He comes from Texas, and so does she, and you know what they say about Texas.
Mansfield was the ideal 50s star. Like the cars of the era, she flared out in all the right places. But her Hollywood career was about to come to an unexpected halt.
Once Marilyn came back from the Actors Studio with Bus Stop, and it was a really huge hit, it was awkward for them to have the two blondes on the same lot, so immediately Jane was shipped overseas to Europe, and all the rest of her films were done in Europe until about 1964, when she came back to do films here, and at that point Marilyn had died.
Undaunted, Mansfield used her banishment overseas to join Bob Hope's famous USO tours.
She was something, and I'll never forget in Japan, she came out in a dress that showed all of her. And we had an NBC guy with us that said, they'll never get away with that. Never get away with that. Because the kids just went crazy. When she would show up, I said, why didn't I buy Kodak stock? You know, because every camera in the place was going zing, 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 zing. And she had this thing where she put her hands in the back and gave it this as though she had to. She came along at the right time for these kids overseas, I'll tell you that. They just loved her.
In 1963, Mansfield became the first major American actress to do a nude scene. The controversy helped make the film a hit and earned her a place in the box office top 10. But in subsequent years, her career stalled after she had a child, and while she dealt with a troubled third marriage. Then, On June 29, 1967, Jane Mansfield was killed in a car accident. She was just 34.
And I was shattered by her tragedy. I mean, I never really quite got over Jane. Marilyn, she had so many problems, you know, always trying to commit suicide, and she had so many problems that you sort of maybe expected maybe that would happen, but you never thought it would. But with Jane, it was more of a tragedy.
Today on Decades, Marilyn Monroe biographer Norman Mailer sits down with Dick Cavett. That's today on Decades.
As our look at Marilyn Monroe concludes, we head back to 1962 as the world said their farewell.
The curtain falls. Brief and simple rites mark the funeral of Marilyn Monroe, as former husband Joe DiMaggio leads a small group of friends in a last tribute to the glamorous actress. Only 25 persons were invited to the services, and no screen stars were in attendance. Miss Monroe's dramatic coach delivered the eulogy, saying he had no words to describe the myth and the legends that grew up about her. The film star's coffin is then moved to a crypt as Mr. DiMaggio and his Marine Corps son walked with other mourners in the cortege. "500 curiosity seekers were kept at a distance all during the ceremonies, and Mr. DiMaggio and his son were among the last to leave. The final fade-out to the story of the poor girl who became a movie star is written finis.
That'll do it for us today. I'm Bill Curtis. As we leave, one last look back at Marilyn Monroe.